Once upon a time, there was a man who had two sons. The younger son came to Dad one day and said, "You know, Dad, I wish you were as good as Dad, because I want my inheritance now, while I can enjoy it still." And lo and behold, Dad hands it over to him. And he runs off to a far country and blows it on riotous living. Well, eventually the money runs out, the friends run out. There's a famine in the land, and the only job he can get is tending pigs. And there he sits in the midst of the muck and the mire of that pigsty, eating the leftovers from the pig's breakfast. And he has an aha moment. You know, even my dad's servants are treated better than I am right now. And he hatches a plan. He will go home and beg for his father's mercy. And on the way home, he starts practicing his speech. "Father, I no longer deserve to be your son. Treat me as one of your servants." "Father, I no longer deserve to be your son. Treat me as one of your hired hands." "Father." And while he's rolling this over in his head, getting closer to home, Dad looks out the kitchen window and sees him coming and runs out to greet him. The son falls at his father's feet and begins to perform his speech, but he gets no farther than Father, and Dad picks him up, hugs him, and starts barking orders. "Get this boy a ring, a robe, clean him up. Kill the fatted calf. Let's have a party, for this son of mine that was lost has now been found. This one who was as good as dead is now alive." Now his older brother was coming in from the fields, where he was doing what he was supposed to be doing, working. All sweaty and hot and tired, he hears the commotion. And he calls one of the servants over and says, "What's going on?" Servant says, "Haven't you heard? Your brother, the one that was lost has now been found. The one who was as good as dead has now been found. And your dad has killed the fatted calf, and they're having a big party." The brother refuses to go in. When Dad hears that he's out there, he goes out and tries to convince him to come in. But the older brother loses it. He just blows his stack and goes off on Dad. "You know, I've done everything you've ever asked me to do. I've been the perfect, dutiful son. And yet never once did you offer to kill even a small goat that I might have a party with my friends. And yet here this son who has wasted all your hard-earned money comes crawling back, and you kill the fatted calf. I don't get it." "Son, everything I have is yours. But this brother of yours who was lost has now been found. This one who is as good as dead has now been made alive. Come into the party. Join the celebration." I've spent my entire life as an older brother, literally as well as figuratively. I have done what was expected of me. I have been the person that I thought people wanted me to be. I did the things that I thought would make everybody happy. To do the right things. I've tried to keep the rules. Well, most of them. I tried to behave. It wasn't a bad life. It's gotten me where I am today. But over the years, I've realized that it's taken a toll. It cuts into joy and the ability to celebrate. Because I look around and I see others that seem to be rewarded so much more than I am for doing so much less. I see incompetence. I see laziness. I become envious, jealous. What's wrong that I don't get those things? St. Paul, Luther will talk about that as living under the law. The law is good. The law is a gift from God. It keeps us safe from one another and from ourselves. But it will also kill, because it leaves us wanting. Because the law cannot give us life. It leads us to envy, jealousy, judgmentalness, a grasping for things to fulfill life, to give us meaning. I remember working with a congregation one time. One of the things I do when I'm teaching congregations how to share the stories of the Bible is to use this particular story and to have them identify with one of the three characters. This particular group, it wasn't a huge group, 12 to 15 people, but they all identified with the older brother. Now, they didn't have to tell me that. I'd already figured that out by the number of constitutions I saw on the table and in the bookshelves, and the number of notes that were posted on kitchen cabinets and other places, instructions, and by their attitude toward others, particularly those different than them, the neighbors. You know, those people. They talked a lot about those people. They were living under the law. And I knew that there was no way, if I had lived in that community, I would go to that church. Whew, it was an ugly place. It helped me see how ugly life under the law, life as the older brother could be. Because none of us can fulfill the law. We always come up short. And so we're always wondering, wanting more. The only one that ever fulfilled the law was Jesus. He didn't succumb to the envy, the jealousy, the grasping, the holding on, but gave it all away that others might have life, that we could celebrate with others for the gifts that they had received, rather than to be jealous of them. It's through Christ's death and resurrection that we are invited into that new way of living, grace-filled. In Christ, we receive grace upon grace and the opportunity for life abundant. He opens the way to experience God's grace in new ways. I learned about those new ways not too long ago as my biological mother and I were reunited. I realized then that I was not only an older brother, but I knew something about being a younger son as well. For I had been lost, and now I was found. It is when we come to recognize our lostness that we can be opened up to hear the good news of God's grace. That we have received it all from God. all that he has, even himself, he gives to us, that we might know grace upon grace and life abundant. A life in community, a life at the party, with others who are lost like us, and those that think they have found it all too. We live our lives between being older brothers and younger brothers, between law and grace. It's why we come week after week to hear the good news, to feel the coolness of the water of our baptisms, to taste God's grace in body and blood, bread and wine, and to experience what grace is like in community as we are gathered together. We need to hear that because the world is not full of grace. So come. Come to the party. For there are lots of older brothers just waiting to greet you, that you too may experience grace upon grace. That amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. 'Twas blind, but now I see. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will